Good morning, 1 Million Cups Daytona Beach.
Good morning!
Welcome. 1 Million Cups is an entrepreneurial forum that is sponsored by the Kaufman Foundation out of Kansas City. And right now, in 183 cities all across the country, groups of entrepreneurs just like us are getting together to share their success stories and their challenges and get feedback from the audience. So I'm really excited about this group and what we do for the business community. Do we have any first-timers here today? Fantastic, welcome.
Right here.
Hey, first time, our youngest attendee ever. I'm also joined by a great group of organizers. Organizers, please raise your hands. Thank you for all that you do, guys. So I'm super excited about our presenter today. We have Dillon Kalkhurst. Dillon is a generational expert, and this morning he's going to be sharing his thoughts and his ideas about communication and bridging generation gaps to create harmony in the workplace and employee retention. Dillon has had a long tenure with Scholastic Books. He was in charge of over 1 million parent volunteers, I believe. He's also a very well-accomplished speaker. He's spoken on national stages, and he wrote a pretty good book called Generation Everyone. I had the pleasure of being his editor on that. Well, without further ado, Dillon.
I have to give Sean a plug. I've been talking this topic for a long time, and my wife used to tell me, you've got to get it out of here and get it into writing, but where in the world do you start? I can tell you, I read Sean's book, The Book, and in a plane ride from here to New York City, and by the time I landed, I opened up my laptop and I started, so really, Sean was the one that inspired me to do that. So if any of you guys in here, have a talent, an expertise, something that you feel passionate about that you want to get into writing, I encourage you to talk to Sean, because it was a great stepping stone for me to finally get this thing released, so it's been awesome. I get to come here every now and then. I travel a lot on Wednesdays, so unfortunately I'm not able to come to the group as often as I'd like to, but I love having the opportunity to speak with you guys today. What I'm going to talk about today is really a 30,000-foot view, because generations is a huge topic. It's very interesting. You can go on and on about the millennials or the baby boomers. You can pigeonhole, different types of things that happen within the generations. So Sean will tell you at the end a little bit about a session that I'm going to be doing next week that's going to dive in a little bit deeper in this. So if you guys are interested in learning more, you could find out a little bit about that. Okay? So what I want to do today is, typically I do about an all-day, a whole full-day session on this topic. So my plan today is to give you a little background of how I got into this, how I started it, and being an entrepreneur myself and leading big, evil corporate America. Scholastic, i.e. 100-year-old company, and now living in Ormond Beach, running this little business out of my guest room, which is awesome. I'll tell you a little bit about the different generations, the 5 active generations that are involved in our community today, and then if we get time, I thought I'd, from a business standpoint, maybe show you how I've leveraged some of this knowledge and these generational trends in one of the case studies with one of my clients to show you kind of how some of this can be used to really shift thinking in a company that could be 30, 40 years old and been doing things, the same way for years. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Very good. All right, so a little bit about me. Sean mentioned I work for Scholastic for over 10 years, and one of the main things I did with them is I was in charge of their 1.25 million parent volunteers. You guys been to a Scholastic book fair? Remember those? You've either been yourself or you'll be going to one real soon here. You're going to be going the next 18 years, and you're buying a lot of books. Yeah. So the interesting thing about Scholastic book fairs is they do about 125,000 book fairs every year, and they're 100% run by parent volunteers. And over the past several years when I was working with them, I noticed that a good portion of their parent volunteers were millennial moms. And dads are starting to get a little bit more involved. Good dad there. But for the most part, the volunteer efforts in the schools are still kind of in the mom's hands. So I started to see a disconnect between the kind of communication that was happening from our 100-year-old, very established legacy brand with the actual people that were running the business in the schools. Because most companies out there that are especially that established are run by baby boomers or older Gen Xers. And a lot of their employees and a lot of their customers, especially with Scholastic, are either Gen Z or millennials. So there was a lot of disconnect that was happening from a communication standpoint. So that's how I kind of became a little bit of, an expert in specifically communicating with millennial families, and then ultimately started looking at the different other generations and went from that point on. So as I said, Sean helped me write the book. It's on Amazon and Kindle. I've also got I think I brought 9 copies with me today if anybody's interested in getting a copy afterwards. And a side fun fact is I'm also the unofficial photographer for the Ormond Beach Chamber of Commerce. That's my picture that's on their new guide. That's the picture they used last year. So I'm a professional photographer, and you can go there and you can see all sorts of beautiful sunrises and sunsets and storm pictures from around the area or wherever I travel. So that's kind of a hobby, but that's not how I pay the bills. Here's how I keep the lights on. My company, D9 Marketing and the Center for Intergenerational Engagement, is I work with companies, with national nonprofit organizations, service organizations, to help them better understand generations, personality training. You guys ever been through the personalities? Because it's very similar. It's all about communications and understanding those around us and those we interact with. I also do a special training on LinkedIn, especially for young entrepreneurs, millennials coming out of college, and how to really leverage LinkedIn to build your network. I'm sure entrepreneurs are the best at leveraging. I'm sure everybody here is on LinkedIn, right? Got it going on. The reason that I'm getting so much work here is, here's an interesting study that was done by Achieve Global back in 2016 when they looked at age stereotyping in the workplace. And when you look at here, the ones that are the most guilty of that is the boss, you see? So what happens to me all the time is I get these old guys come in and say, help us figure out our millennials. These kids are out of control. I don't get it. Because they're the ones that got this mindsets out there. And they have they have the reason to do that, because if you look at some of the interesting studies that are coming out, this is the Deloitte Millennial Survey that came out this year. 43% of millennials in the workplace are already mapping their strategy to get out. And a lot of that has to do with the different challenges they're experiencing in the workplace. So the top 3 concerns when they ask them in that study, why are you leaving? It's business ethics, meaning they feel like their company's all in it for the bottom line and they're not in it for the greater good, making the world a better place, which is very important to young people. Diversity and flexibility. Too many baby boomer bosses, this is the biggest thing that I see is the flexibility. And I used to work for a great baby boomer boss over at Scholastic. Love him to death, Bill Berry. You watch it, hey Bill. He's a great leader, but he's one of these guys that likes to have his flock nearby. A lot of baby boomer managers, if they feel that they can't see their employees sitting in their cubes from 9 to 5, then the work must not be getting done. We're millennials and young people, we all know entrepreneurs. We work all the time everywhere, right? I could be sitting on the beach having some real good business conversations with my smartphone. It's not uncommon for a millennial mom to leave work at 3 o'clock, go pick up their kid, take them to soccer practice, go home, cook them dinner, put them in the bath, put them to bed, hop back on that mobile phone and work nonstop until 1 in the morning. So millennials and young people are very effective at getting things done, but maybe not the way that baby boomers and older Gen Xers did. So flexibility is important to them. And lastly, personal and professional development. They want to make sure that their companies are investing in them, not just in ways that make their company better, but companies that are forward-thinking enough to put professional development out there. It's not only making the company better, but also making the person better. So many people will come to me, well, if these millennials are going to leave in 3 years, why am I going to invest money in them? Why am I going to invest money to train these people that are just going to leave? And I just sit back and say, well, what if you don't invest money in them and they stay?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of change the mindset a little bit. All right, so everybody wants to talk about millennials. Go to Google and just put in managing millennials. This was yesterday, and you can see we've got 12,200,000 people there to help you.
Yeah.
So I decided not to write another millennial book, and I decided to focus a little bit more on the broader picture. So the goal of my book and the goal of my workshops and sessions is, number one, is self-awareness. I truly believe that before you can understand other personalities or other generations, you have to really understand why you think the way you do. So step 1 is self-awareness. Step 2 is to dispel those negative stereotypes around there. We're going to have a little fun with those today. But there's a lot of generational stereotypes out there, whether it's millennials, boomers. We all have stereotypes of people older and younger. That's been around for millions of years. And lastly, once you get these two things out of the way, then you can really sit down and embrace and leverage the strength of what I like to call age diversity, whether it's in your workplace, your nonprofit, or even your customer base. So that's kind of the three things that I focus on when I talk it in my book. So let's talk about the generations. You know, this is interesting times now. For the first time in history, there are 5 active generations in the economy. That's different because you guys, you know, back in 1900, you guys remember, what would you guess the average life expectancy was in 1890?
60.
35.
43. So back then, there was a young person and an old person in office, right?
Yeah, go on.
So think about that. So now, you know, this is kind of relatively new that you still have, you know, someone in the silent generation, 2% still working out there. Now, if you go to the Ormond Beach Public, that's like 90% of them. So we're a little bit older here, and that's cool. But you can see the largest generation in the workforce right here, and this happened about 1.5 years ago, is the millennials. You know, so that's why there's so much challenge out there. Just the Gen X and the millennials and the boomers make up 93% of the workforce. So there's a lot of, you know, opportunity and possibilities for communication breakdowns in the workplace. And as we go further, you know, I want you to understand too that, you know, I'm not, even though I write the book on generations, I'm not a big fan of labeling people just simply by the age or the year that they were born. Because generations are general in nature. So, you know, if you Google the different times of when the generations change, depending on what research you look at, it can swing 3 years one way, 3 years the other way. So by nature, you know, about 90% of people born in a given time frame, based on their the things that happened in their formative years, kind of have the same mindsets and values and preferences. But there are going to be outliers. You know, obviously, I mean, I go to Gold's Gym every morning, and there's a guy, he's got to be 97 years old doing 9 miles an hour on the treadmill. He's an outlier. You know, so there are people that may be outside of that. And that's the same way, you know, for people that are born in different areas. So understand that everybody, just because they were born in a certain year, may not act that certain way. You may hear something today and say, I am not like that. And that's cool. You might be a cusper. You guys heard that term, cusper? I am a cusper. I was born in 1965. That's a magical line that somebody said, no more baby boomers. You are now Generation X. So because I was born on that year, you know, I am considered a cusper. I'm a baby boomer, Gen X cusper. And cuspers can be very confusing, you know, because you've got one foot in one generation and one in the other. And the biggest example for us, anybody who's kind of around 50, 53, are going to get this. But, you know, our biggest challenge, or at least mine is with the mobile phone. You know, I truly understand the power that phone gives me. But there's not a day that doesn't go by I don't want to just hurl it out the window. You know, I can put it down. I'll put that thing on my bar Friday and not touch it till Sunday. Because people that are close to me, they can get me by what? They know Linda, my wife, always got her phone on. So I know I can get reached by those who are super important, but I hate that freaking noise. I don't want to hear that thing go off on the weekends. But younger generations, Gen X, and I mean the millennials and the Gen Z, they can't even fathom that. Why would you leave your phone? And my son has said, Dad, you left your phone? Yeah. And they can't, it's because it's not, but that's fine. That's how they were brought up. They don't know a time without it. You know, so but the good thing about being a cusper is we have a unique ability to really understand a wider breadth of people. You know, so Gen X baby boomer cuspers tend to be very good communicators. Gen Xers as a whole tend to be good communicators, but you put them up closer to the boomers or put them closer to the millennials, they can communicate a lot more with both generations. You know, so your cuspers tend to be real good salespeople, you know, good communicators, which is going to be even more important as these younger generations rise up and haven't had a lot of experience reading faces and things like that. They're master texters, but they can't really communicate from a facial standpoint. So you might be a cusper. All right. So the biggest challenge that I hear in the companies is the communications differences and preferences between the different generations. So let's start with that. So if you've got to communicate with boomers, they still like to talk on the phone. You guys remember that thing? You remember that? You still have one? I have one in my house too.
It's my hurricane phone.
There you go. You guys been to Betty's up there in Norman by the Sea? They got one right on the counter. I have to touch it every time I go in One of the things I like to do when I got a big crowd of millennials is I always bring a millennial up on stage. And I bring my rotary phone, I put it on the stage, and I say, okay, let's, I want you to call your best friend. What do you think the first thing happens? They don't know the number. Because we used to have that thing, what was it called?
Memorize.
Rolodex. Remember that thing? You'd have it all that, and you'd get all rattered and tattered. You'd have the business card staked to it. That's how we kept up with our names. We had to memorize numbers. So then I let them go on their phone and get the number, and then they sit there and be funny. You watch them do it, and they just sit there and wait. Her niece did it in my phone this morning. It's funny. She's 14?
Yep.
Yeah, she was just doing that. She's like, God, this takes so long. If you don't hit that thing right there, wrong number. You gotta hit that thing hard. It's gotta make a dent. And you know what? Nothing is more relaxing and therapeutic than the sound of that thing slamming. Remember you get pissed off? Bam! It's relieving. So you're talking to boomers, they still want to talk on the phone. You ever texted a baby boomer and then they call you? What's up? I just texted you. I know, what do you want? Read the text. Now you're committed for 30 minutes. They like to talk. They will do email as well. Us Gen Xers, well, we unfortunately like email. When I was at Scholastic, we would get, I'd get 150 emails a day. That was average. We treat email like our electronic filing cabinet. You look at a Gen Xer's email box, they've got all these folders on the left side. You'll go to a meeting, you'll have all this wonderful stuff, you'll talk about it, and the meeting always ends with, hey, send me an email, what we just talked about. Why? Because we got to put it in your folder. So we like email. If you're communicating with Gen Xers, send them emails. Even though they hate it and have that love-hate relationship with it, that's how they like to communicate. We will talk on the phone. We do like Facebook, and also, we'll do the texting. Older millennials and younger millennials, I want to separate them a little bit because there's quite a bit of a difference. There's a lot more difference within the millennial generation than there is within the older generations because so much stuff has changed. So older millennials tend to kind of steer more towards the Gen Xers. They're the biggest users of Facebook. Even though baby boomers are the fastest growing segment in Facebook, these guys use it a lot. They like to text and they're using Facebook Messenger. The younger millennials and Gen Z, who's our teens, 21 and below, they're even going beyond texting. They're using Facebook, FaceTime, Snapchat, WhatsApp. They're using all sorts of different digital technologies, but rarely will you ever hear them talk on the phone. So, I talk to Kiwanis a lot. You know guys know Kiwanis? I'm a Kiwanian. Love Kiwanis. 100-year-old service organization. Their average age member is in their 60s. They've got some issues recruiting young people. And they always come up to me, them young people are always on their phones. And so I hear that all the time. So I decided, I'm a visual learner. So I decided to pick up my phone and look at all the things that I use my smartphone for. And I put together this short video to explain to those older who may not be used to the phone to realize what they're doing with their phone. So I thought you guys would enjoy this. many different things I use that for besides the phone. So that goes far. So let's talk about the generations. I like to call them generational historical signposts, because every generation, as they were developing or growing in their teens, had some things that happened in their formative years that tend to shape the way they live the rest of their life. So each one of the generations I talk about, I lead each chapter of my book with a list of the historical signposts. So let's talk about the baby boomers. If you look at the baby boomers, there were some turbulent times that happened when they were growing up, right? There's lots of assassinations. You had Nixon. You had Vietnam War. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was kind of happening as they were growing up, and they did. Finally they started to rebel. They started to have free love. They had Woodstock. Because of this, they started to be kind of the first counterculture that pushed back. This is the first generation that used first names at work. The generation before them, we're not going to have time to talk about the silent generation, but that was the Mad Men generation. Draper, Don Draper coming in, everybody's got the ties on, they got the bar in the office, they're drinking, martinis at lunch, that kind of stuff. And, there you go, cigarettes everywhere. So, these were the signposts for the baby boomers. Now, there's lots of stereotypes that you hear about millennials all the time, but what are some of the stereotypes you think millennials have to baby boomers? Millennials in the room, this is a free zone. What do you think about us old people in the room? All right, well, let's
Tell us.
Huh?
Tell us. You're thinking of one. I see your eyes. You're thinking of one.
Come on. Give us one.
Resistant to change.
What?
Resistant to change.
Resistant to change, kind of closed-minded, right? In the essence of time, we'll move on to shy people. All right, we're closed-minded, set in their ways, don't care about or respect younger generations. And interestingly enough, the millennials have this same issue. They don't think the old people respect them. Young people don't think, the older people don't think the young people respect them. When there is, a lot to learn from each side. They're just kicking back, wanting to retire, leading the inactive lives, and technophobes. But, realistically, when you look at boomer strengths, if you still have them in your workforce, or if some boomer, in their 50s or even their 60s reaches out to you as a startup and you're looking for good employees, you may find, so we were talking about this on the way here, there's a lot of boomers who were in the military, spent 30 years, learning valuable skills, and they've retired, and they've been doing this for 3 years, and they're tired of fishing on the beach and not catching anything. So they're like, hey, let me jump back in and do some things. So you could look at these types of skills and strengths that most baby boomers have. They're dedicated, loyal, hard workers. They're workaholics. These guys, and that's the hard thing too about, as I mentioned earlier, with the baby boomer bosses. The millennial mom leaves at 3 to pick up her kids. Baby boomer boss is like, she ain't working. Because they expect them to be there 9 to 5. And I remember, I used to have to look out my window to make sure my boss left before I did.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is he gone yet? People still do that. You got to wait for them older managers to get on home, and then you can sneak out. Yeah. So they're team players, are goal-oriented, and they make great teachers and mentors. That's where a lot of young companies are missing the boat. These people, they're master communicators. They've been around for a long time. They're excellent at soft skills, which millennials are not good at. Meaning, like I said, facial development, conflict resolution. So think about reverse mentoring. Partnering young people with, so that they can help each other and not just one way. Gen X signposts, the pendulum tends to shift one way or another. It's kind of crazy in the baby boomer times, and then when I grew up, and when my sister grew up, things got a little more calm. We had MTV, we're the MTV generation. Every generation, by the way, when they come up, is considered slackers by the ones before. This has been going on forever. So that's not new. But we were called the slacker generation. We just sat around and we watched MTV. Remember when MTV played music videos? Yeah. So I remember sitting around there. We had Run DMC, man. I remember when Run DMC came out and the rap music kind of started back then. My dad would tell me, that's not music, son, they're talking. But how big is hip hop gone? It kind of started that. The dot-com boom, we had Reagan. That's local, right? We had the killer spring breaks that happened in Lauderdale and here and all that was going on. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, but really the biggest thing that shaped us was we were the first generation of divorce. When we were growing up, that's when, the baby boomer and the silent gen parents said, enough, man. I don't have to live with this person just because, the pastor said way back when. And divorce really spiked when we were growing up. So we became the first ever latchkey kids. Now, because of that, most of us in my generation had the opportunity to come home from school about 2:30 or 3, spend 3 hours running around the neighborhood, running around the woods, breaking stuff, and having that 3 hours to fix it before mom or dad got home. That made us very independent and very enterprising, very creative. You know, we didn't have the helicopter parents to swoop in and fix it before, you know, and help us, you know, put the glue on there. You know, so you got Gen X employees, or you work with the Gen X family members, they tend to be more independent. You know, they don't like to be micromanaged. You know, give them a goal, give them the tools to reach the goal, and get out of their way. Good times, right? All right, so our strengths, we're self-starters, we're creative, great communicators. They typically are the biggest revenue generators. Gen Xers make great salespeople. They're adaptable, good with change. You know, change is, that was kind of our life. You know, so we're like, whatever. Millennials have a lot more difficulty with that. Good problem solvers, and bottom line is they get done. All right, so let's talk about millennial signposts. Again, the pendulum shifted back to a little bit more chaotic stuff, right? So you look at what the millennials went through growing up. Of course, this was the biggest thing that happened. There's a gigantic difference in the values of the millennials that remember that and the ones that didn't. It kind of happened right in the middle of their generation growing up in the formative years. But this caused that. You know, and also remember that this is the first generation of the 24-hour news cycle. Now, when we grew up, when did you watch the news? 6, 7. Walter Cronkite at 6:30. I did not disturb my dad from 6:30 to 7 with his newspaper and scotch. It was the afternoon newspaper because back then we had two. There was so much news, and the only place you could get it, there was a morning and an afternoon newspaper. Now they don't have any newspapers in some towns. But now these kids growing up, and we all know it, I mean, they're seeing this stuff happen live. You know, my son is a millennial Gen Z customer. And when the Parkland shooting happened, I'll never forget this. We were watching it on TV, it was horrifying. But I remember him coming out of the room, very disturbed, a tear coming out of his eye. Because during the shooting, he was watching it live on Snapchat from a kid that was hiding under his desk and shots were going off in the hall. So no longer do young people wait till 6:30 to kind of see what happened that day. They're not reading about it. They're not watching the videos. They're actually there with it. You know, so this has them, you know, a lot of stuff's happened. Now, this was the first shooting, Columbine, remember? They saw that like 10 years ago, but now it's kind of accelerated, unfortunately. But the biggest thing that's happened that kind of shaped the millennials was us. Helicopter parents, okay? I will admit that I'm a helicopter parent. My wife will admit that too, and that's cool because, again, the pendulum shifted. It doesn't just shift with the signposts and what's going on in the world. Parenting styles shift. You know, millennials are in all this free stuff, free range, free, you know, gluten-free. You go to Publix, there's a whole aisle of stuff with the word free in it. Yeah. You know what kind of food we had, Gen X, growing up? Parent-free. Anything that didn't require parent involvement. We were the first generation with a microwave. We remember the first microwave. Remember that thing? It was about that big. It had one dial on it. And when it was done, it would go ding. And I remember looking at it. We were watching. My mom would say, back off. Yeah. Don't get too close to the microwave. It's got radiation. We could eat the food that's being cooked in it, but just don't watch it cook. And then food started coming out that was parent-free. Remember those hot dogs with the cheese in it already? And if you go 1/10 of a second too long in that microwave, it boom. Yeah, so the parenting shifted it. So our parents were working. You know, they were trying to do the two-job income and all that. They were trying to, working moms were trying to make their way up the corporate ladder. There wasn't a lot of time for us. We weren't their focus. We shifted. When we had kids, I'm not raising kids the way my mom raised me. So we kind of went too far this way. And we kind of didn't let them fall. You know, we were right there to catch them. And failure is the best educator, is it not? Yeah. So I think that's, you know, a lot of the reason that millennials are having challenges in the workforce is because they expect to be managed kind of the way they were parented. They need to know they are doing a good job. I have to teach baby boomer managers to put it in their calendar to remind them to recognize their millennial employees almost every day. Good job. And that's painful for us old people to think about that. But that's how they were brought up. You know, so they need to know on a constant basis, constant feedback. But the good thing about these guys, you know, we don't have to go too long with the stereotype. I mean, this is what everybody talks about. They're self-centered, narcissistic, entitled, lazy, disloyal. We've all heard those. They are the most hammered generation in history. If you go and search millennials are killing in Google, you get 2.2 million results. Because there are actual articles on the internet of millennials that have killed all those industries right there. It's fun to bash millennials. It's exhausting, and I hate it for them because I truly believe that they're the future of this country. They killed Jeffrey the giraffe last month. Did you see that? Millennials are being blamed for Toys R Us going down because they're not having kids until they're in their 30s or late 20s. So anyway, they're really passionate, enthusiastic, digitally engaged. They're independent. They can really get things done. They're information gatherers. They're culturally relevant. So if you're a 40-something, 50-something trying to do a startup, bring in these younger people because they can tell you, what's relevant. And that message is stupid. They're honest. They're brutally honest with you. They know how to get things done. I'm not going to talk a lot about Gen Z. I have a whole session on Gen Z. But the main thing I want to talk about is, I call them generation stress. 20% of teens, we're talking about 21 and below, 20% of them have a diagnosed case of mental illness. And it's always the first thing that comes out in the Parkland shooting. They talk about mental illness, and because it's always some kind of mental issue with these psychopaths that go in there and do these kind of things. But then it always diverts back to gun control within 24 hours. It infuriates me. Let's put more cops in the schools and all that. And I can go on and on about that. But there's issues with this generation. This Time magazine cover, you can't really read the date there, but it says November 6, 2016. What else happened that week? Hillary against Trump, that was the election week. The biggest election we've ever seen, the biggest media promotion we've ever seen around an election, and Time magazine decided to do that cover. It's a silent epidemic, guys. 50% of all mental illness cases happen by the age of 14, and students that are age 14 or older, about 50% of them are going to drop out of high school. So, that's a lot of that has to do, with social media and the fact that these poor kids out there are having to compare their average everyday life with everybody else's highlight reels. But the real reason these kids are stressed out, they can't slam the phone. That's such stress relief. Really? That's how we got it done. But seriously, if these kids slam their phones, it's $1,000. You can't do that. But when you look at Gen Z so far, I'm excited about it. We should be excited about it when being cuffs, because these young people, and you guys probably see it, you probably got a lot of them working with you. 60% of them are already telling their guidance counselors, their parents, that they want to be entrepreneurs. They're focused on privacy and safety, this Parkland stuff, and they're starting to pay attention. Where the millennials, they'll share everything. They share their baby mom pictures. Hey, look, week 18. Every week they're putting the pictures as they have their babies coming along. But this younger generation is finally starting to pay attention. That's why they like Snapchat better than Instagram. They do Snapchat because if you do Snapchat, it disappears, so they think. But Instagram, that's permanent. So you ever see spring break, you see the 3 girls out there on the beach taking the Instagram picture by the waves? You've all seen it. Yeah. They're out there and they're like doing their selfie and they get the perfect picture, and then they run back and they look at it. No, not good enough. They got to come back up here. They pose again, get the light just right. This goes on for like an hour before they get the perfect picture, because Instagram's permanent. They're interested in volunteering to gain work experience. So think about that. Going to these high schools, going to the key clubs, going to these DECA clubs, and seek out these kids that are really, they can come and intern with you and learn valuable experiences. Bottom line, guys, they're going to be the biggest population in 2 years. They're going to represent 40% of the population. All right. Here's what's interesting, is they're really trending to be more like their grandparents. The recession in 2008 freaked them out. They saw their parents lose everything, lose their houses, lose their jobs. So already this generation is saving more money at 20 years old than any other generation in history. They're not getting credit cards. They're not getting into debt. They're seeing their millennial siblings coming out of college with $40,000 college debt and working at Starbucks. They're pushing back. So a lot of the things, they're more private, they're saving money, waste not, want not. They're starting to trend like the silent generation grandparents, which is interesting. All right, so a quick case study, then I'll take some questions. This is a client of mine, the Save Around Coupon Book. They've been around for 30 years. Family-owned company out of Binghamton, New York. You guys familiar with the book? Schools sell them as a fundraiser. They sell the books for $25. The school keeps $12.50. They're in 175 different markets around the country. Great coupon books, got over $5,000 in coupons. It's just a good fundraising program for schools, but it's a book. It's print. So it's not really, and what I talked about, I've been working with these millennial parents in schools for years and years. So when you look at the typical fundraisers that happen in schools, we've all been part of these. We've either sold them or we've helped our kids sell these things. But gift wrap is a big one. Gift wrap's going down because younger millennial parents are pragmatic because of the recession. They're not, it goes against their values to spend $20 on a roll of gift wrap and they get a Walmart for $1. Then you got the chocolate stuff and the nuts. Well, peanut allergies are up 300% with teens over the last 10 years. So a lot of schools are not even letting chocolate type products in the school. And they also, as I mentioned, there's not any free range chocolate. So they're looking at what they're putting in their kids' bodies. So these types of fundraisers are going down. Maybe there is. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find it somewhere. Walkathons are doing okay because physical fitness is good, but it's a lot of work and there's inclusion issues. What about the kid who's overweight and can't walk? So there's a lot of things that have to deal with that. The one thing that's going up because of these two main trends right here, as I already mentioned, is that millennial parents and their Gen Z kids are saving money. 92% of millennials use coupons, and they also are rewarding companies that give back. I'm sure every one of you guys, if you're doing a startup, have some sort of social impact component, corporate social responsibility. You better start and lead with that. Tom's Shoes, look at all these models. That's the new consumer. Anyone that's 40 or below, they will not do business with you if they feel like you're hurting the environment or doing anything that's not good for the country or the world. So, like I said, 92% are using coupons. 61% of millennial moms spend 2 hours a week looking for coupons. They also want to share their opportunities and how they want to make a difference. They're not, doing things separate with their kids. They want to show their kids their values and the things that they're doing. And they reward organizations that help them. So they save and they give. It's just a no-brainer. So what I did with these guys is I said, Save Around's a great brand. Don't get rid of it. But let's have a campaign around it. So we changed it to Coupons That Care. So now when we go into Lenny's up there, he's not just doing a coupon in the coupon book. He's providing a coupon that cares. Because if someone uses that coupon, it's helping their kid's school, helping the Kiwanis group or something like that. So a very simple name change. And then we also made it tech-friendly, launched an app. So now if you buy the Volusia County book from a school at $25, you get access to all 300,000 places. So if you go to LA for the week, you open it up and you see coupons you can use. So because it's tech-savvy, they can do that. We also made it shareable. So they have a nice online mobile-based thing where, and it's great for Florida here because we all have friends that live outside of Florida. So if my mom lives in Raleigh, and my son Jordan wants to sell a book, a Raleigh coupon book, he can simply just send her that link up there. Mom buys the Raleigh book, school here keeps $12.50. So we just did these minor little changes, and so far the results have been, pretty dramatic. And so that's how you take a company with a 30-year-old business model and just tweak some of the messaging to better resonate with the younger, up-and-coming customers. So bottom line is we kind of sum things up again. I told you next week, and Sean can say more about this. I'm going to get a lot more deep dive in each one of the generations and how to specifically recruit them, engage them, motivate them. But today, if you just look at what you learned today, do these 5 things. Become self-aware, challenge the stereotypes, find the talents in everyone, ask them what their talents are, adjust your communication styles, and lastly, become an intergenerational engagement maven like me. How do you do that? Well, you buy the book. So you can read the book. Just want to let you know that I'm very passionate about youth mental health. That's why I talked a little bit about it today. But every book that I sell, I donate $1 to the Youth Mental Health Project. Check them out. They're a wonderful organization that that provides parent education as early as elementary school to help parents recognize early signs of mental health so they can get their kids help before that age of 14 when things start happening. So like I said, I brought some books today. You can also go to Amazon. I also have some free things on my website that you might find interesting. You can go to my website it'd be cool if I had it up. Oh, there it is. Oh, look, the mic's not good.
Top right.
Okay, but just in case. 5-gens.com. Get a group of your coworkers or friends together, or maybe even your family members, and play my generational Jeopardy game. It's just like out Trebek. It's fun, and it's got the different categories, and like something will pop up, and you have to guess which one of the generations it is, and you keep score. It's a lot of fun with that. I also have generational cheat sheets, which is a one sheet for each one of the generations that talks about the signposts, the values, and things like that, that you could download and share in your office. And lastly, let's stay connected. Follow me on these different social networks. I'm very active, especially on LinkedIn. I post on a daily basis various different generational interesting articles and things like that. So Sean, before I take questions, do you want to tell them about next week?
We'll do
Yeah,
that.
we'll go ahead and we'll do some questions real quick, and
Sure.
then